All council members are present except Shelley Hargans. Please stand for pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the time that we get to spend together. Let us make wise and good decisions for our town. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, proclamations, recognitions, appointments, and presentations. We just have one. Justin Jensen, Tama County Flood Control and Water Conservation District presentation and discussions on the Corning subbasin and the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, GSP draft plan.
There we go. How y'all doing tonight?
Good.
So, because I don't know all of your backgrounds, I decided to give you a brief overview conversation tonight about SGMA background to start. The SGMA, which is Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, is from 2014. The basic requirements are laid out by DWR, Department of Water Resources, designated the sub-basins throughout the state, divided them up, and set Corning sub-basin, only named because the city is in it. It's not just within the city of Memphis. It's a large sub-basin shared through multiple counties as high priority. The sustainable groundwater management must take place by 2042 for the entire sub-basin. Sustainable groundwater management essentially means that you are using groundwater in a way that maintains level and doesn't cause undesirable results. The Groundwater Sustainability Plan, which is the GSP, has to be submitted at the beginning of next year. The GSP describes how to achieve sustainability. So, the point of SGMA is to have locally driven planning and regulation. The state acts as the backstop in case of failure. And for all of your concerns, the key to this is that the goal is to have it be driven and be maintained locally. Having the state take over would be perceived as a negative for everybody involved, both cost and regulatory wise. All right, so as we can see here, the sub-basin includes the city of Corning, along with portions of Glenn County. It's vastly within Tehama County, but a group of GSAs, the Flood Control District is one of them, of which I am the manager, and then there's a group of agencies, Glenn County, Irrigation Districts, and the Water District that form the GSA in Glenn County. The overall goal is to coordinate between all of the GSAs and develop one singular plan. All right. The true goal is to implement a legally sufficient SG plan so that we do not expose ourselves to being taken over by the state. Right now, we are just completing public outreach and stakeholder outreach. As a group, we want to work together to make this thing all happen. That's the real goal. So, overview of the plan. So, of course, there's a basic content description right at the beginning, who we are, what the basin is, a description of the basin, how we measure what sustainability is, identify any programs or projects that help get to sustainability, and implementation. The GSP, in its current draft form, has an executive summary and 8 sections. I'll give you a little brief of each one of those. So, the introduction describes the 2 GFAs and sort of the rules of each of us working together. Section 2, which is the plan area, gives a more in-depth description of what plans exist within the area for water management, existing wells, how many wells there are in the area, density, what water districts there are, and of course the major cities, including Corning. So the initial key to all this is what we call basin setting. It's basically looking at the area and what features influence groundwater. The conditions within the basin. So as you can see, the things that are of most concern: surface water depletion, land subsidence, seawater intrusion is really not an issue for us here. Lowering of groundwater levels and reduction in overall storage. The parameters for setting up the existing conditions. We took long-term groundwater elevations. As you can see up there, the trend is for a long-term drop in the level of groundwater elevations in subbasins. As we move closer and closer to the recent drought conditions, less use of super surface water, things of that nature, you can see there's sort of a relatively steep decline here towards the end. All right. We have monitoring wells throughout. Those are the graphs from those throughout the basin area. As you can see, they're all somewhat different. So, setting a water budget. This is essentially what comes in versus what goes out. This is done by creating models about what is already there and what we use each year, what goes in under all different types of parameters, and what goes out. The goal here is to take inventory and look at all of the possible sources that could come in and could go out. As you see here, there are many. And not only are there many sources going in and out, there's also interaction between all of the aquifers in the subbasins. So it's important to get a real good idea of what goes in and out on a regular basis. So, the results of all of this data in setting up all of this is that historically the basin has been relatively flat, and it's only recently that we've got a downward trend. We call it somewhat declining, probably mostly because of decreased surface water delivery in the past couple of decades. We figure going forward there will be a continual imbalance, and this will cause if nothing is done, this will cause a regular decline. So, Section 5, setting up monitoring so that we understand what continues to happen throughout different areas of the basin. So this is measuring elevations in all these areas in existing wells, and also part of this is so that we make sure we know when we're getting so low that we cause an effect to other wells. So land subsidence, which by the way is not a significant issue in the Corning subbasin, is simply tested by survey monuments and regularly checked. One extensometer, which I do not actually know what that is, so I won't explain it to you, and some satellite data. All right, so quality, which is another parameter of the GSP. This is basically just done through samples and testing. In general, water quality throughout the basin is not significantly impacted. All right, so interconnected surface water. We typically use groundwater as a proxy. It is essentially saying that when you have this much water level in the river, you have this much water in the ground level. What's the interaction between those two? All right, so now we get to the good stuff, which is what is the criteria to know that we are sustainably managing our groundwater subbasin? We set minimum thresholds, so this is basically where are we going to be when we get an undesirable result? We have a measurable objective. These are the goals, and of course we want to allow some amount of flexibility. Year to year, we will have different amounts of water coming in and different amounts going out. If you have a hard line in all places, you are never going to be successful. And then undesirable results, which is what we talked about earlier. Things like not enough water, surface water depletion, and the ground essentially sinking. So terminology, minimal threshold, that is a set quantitative value. It's set at each individual monitoring location. You saw all those monitoring locations up there. Every one of them will have its own minimum threshold, and that is the marking for the sustainability indicators. All right. Sorry, slow with this. All right. Objectives. So this is the target goals. So there's a range between the objective and the minimum. So we are setting up at each monitoring well that range that allows us to sort of set parameters for groundwater use. All right. So the whole goal of this is to avoid undesirable results as defined by water code shall be based on a quantitative description of the combination of minimum threshold exceedances that causes significant and unreasonable effects in the basin. Obviously, there is some room for interpretation of what those mean. The GSP goal is to set up our interpretation of what that means. So, here's a list of criteria. As those 6 items, lowering of groundwater, how we measure it, what our objectives are, and what we consider an undesirable result. In each one of those sections, I'm not going to go through them individually because you guys will have access to read these. It would be very boring. The remainder of the 6, as you can see in each one of these, we've set up how we measured it, what the thresholds are, what our objective is, and defined what the undesirable result will be. All right, so after all of this, the GSP is now complete. Potential projects and management actions within the plan. So it's our goal to focus on flexible use.
development and incentive for best practices in agriculture, in other types of irrigation, water management. Maximize available surface water use in lieu of groundwater and or to recharge groundwater basins. Maximize that recharge, the available supplies for recharge, and facilitate collaboration between all forms of government or governance. So we've come up with a list of potential projects. Our general attempt was to collaborate with all stakeholders to figure out what those possible projects would be. Here's a list of some possibilities. One thing to be stated about this is the GSP is a potential plan. As we move into the future, this is a 20-year program. These plans will likely change, their viability will likely change. As we engage more with stakeholders like the City of Corning, these plans might be modified. But things like well management itself, which is just direct management of the entire sub-basin to A, get an understanding of how much water we pump where, and B, how it can be used more efficiently potentially. Education in agriculture. This is simply best practices stuff. Agriculture in our area is already significantly adept at this, so this is the small additional portions that will help move along. Policies and ordinances. Part of the GSP, the plan will be putting in place policies and ordinances to prevent the undesirable effects. And use of full surface water allocation. So this is just making sure that we use as much as possible. So potential for some projects moving forward. Once again, these projects are just things that we have determined are possibilities. So this is recharging projects, as you can see. Invasive plant removal, they tend to have large uptakes. Off-stream storage, when we do have an excess of surface water. Recycling water projects. And if you see down there, you guys are down there at the very bottom, you guys have a large surface area that captures storm water. It is a potential to be reused for recharge. All right. As we implement the plan, as I said, this thing was going to change over the 20-year period. We will likely sort of take this in 5-year steps. This is the very, very beginning of this planning stage within the subbasin. So it is likely that these things will be liquid and move throughout time. But we will be gathering more data, filling in gaps, expanding the plan as needed as we come up and work together with the stakeholders to create or modify projects. Here's the sort of big dog in the house. This is a state-mandated regulatory program. It has a price tag associated with it. The price tag is approximately $1 million per year. How that is likely to get paid for is only in the early stages. Currently, we have to get a plan approved through the state, and then we will get finals on what the cost will be to determine how it gets paid. This will likely be a combination of grants, of fees associated with regulation, particularly of things like direct land use and oversight, permitting fees, and as we move forward and as we, after we get approval, those things will all be defined and determined. All right.
So, what are we gonna do next?
You can see here right now, we just finished our public workshop timeframes, and the public comment period ended on the 25th. We received comments already from your management staff. If anything arises from questions from you tonight, I will actually enter them into our database after this as well. Then the vote is on November 10th to adopt the final GSP. There will be a short series of public hearings, and then the intent will be final adoption and giving it to DWR prior to the deadline at the end of January. Once we do that, we will rapidly have to work through funding setups. Hopefully we'll be working with DWR at that time. Up until this point, all of this work has been funded pretty much solely by grants from DWR. And so it is our goal to try and extend that to the greatest amount possible and give us some room to figure out the permanent funding mechanisms. The overall timeline. So in 2017, the GSAs were formed. The implementation begins early next year, and there is a requirement within the Act to be fully self-sustainable by 2042. So you can see this is a very long-term program. They give us many years to get through the term sustainable, and there are lots of potential programs that have to make it happen. All right. So, once again, that's the 8 portions of the plan right there. And if you guys have any questions for me at this point, I would love to open it up so that I can answer them for you to the best of my ability. And on this last page here, this is just how to get a hold of us and who we are for any further questions or interactions after.
Do you have a copy of that for us, or can you email us at Department of Rating?
I have emailed it to you, but I will absolutely email any more you need. So
I have it, but you know it.
And also, Nicole is coming in come Thursday, so if anybody wants to request more hard copies, we can bring them. She can bring
No,
them.
this is the email, that's fine.
Okay, excellent. That makes it easier. So, now the board steps over, any questions?
Does anybody in the audience has any questions for him first? Julie? Anybody up here got any questions for him?
How hard, I mean, I know it's almost impossible to predict, but what modeling, I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but everything is weather dependent pretty much. And, what are your predictions? Do they foresee the drought continuing, or?
So, interestingly, this GSP is generally what we'll call super long range planning, super long range effect. It actually, the data takes into account drought, low water years. We consider those to be short-term effectors on a long-term plan. And so we don't see when we're using this data and we're trying to do a long-term plan, those are more like the things that you do, sort of on a reactive basis, an instantaneous basis. This whole thing is intended to make the groundwater basin much more sustainable, much more flat, so that when we do have these really, really dry groups of years, the drawdown doesn't have as much serious effect on the overall health of the groundwater subbasin. So we're not doing data predicting on weather per se.
Yeah.
Right? Our goal is to take the data that we have and use it to try and predict how much water we can take out of the basin over the long term. And right now, it appears as though we're taking maybe just a little too much, and we're not, we don't have enough activities to recharge it rapidly enough. The goal is to have this resource be available to everybody in perpetuity. And obviously, drought most definitely has an effect on it, right? How much rainfall you get in any given year most definitely has an effect on it. But it's hard to determine at this point how those short-term effects affect the long-term plan.
Now, will any of this information have any bearing on possibly encouraging the building of the Sykes Reservoir?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Will any of your data have any help in encouraging of the building of the Sykes Reservoir?
I think the answer will be no, because these plans are generally vastly about groundwater itself. However, surface water use, may come into play. We may discuss that things as we move along. And overall, the great thing about having a groundwater use sustainability agency is that we are then at we'll call it call of our stakeholders to push that agenda as it continues to improve. And so, for example, if we think it is a good way to move forward in sustainability of groundwater to support a specific project, we will then be able to let resources to make that happen.
That's kind of what I was gonna ask about too, the Sykes Reservoir. They've talked about it in years past, and I say they, I don't know who, it's been talked about, the possibility of putting a reservoir out west of Haskina, up in the gorge area.
Yeah.
Is that something that is even talked about or feasible anymore to collect more groundwater? Because they talk about groundwater recharges everything, but we don't have any reservoirs, centralized in Tama County or near Tama County.
Yep. The diversion of excess surface water is most definitely part of our plan. If you notice in there, several of those projects have things like taking stormwater and using it for groundwater recharge, taking high flows in certain areas and using it for groundwater recharge, right? Keeping the water within the subbasin, right? Everything that flows out of the mountains down to the river doesn't end up here, it ends up in the bay. And so if we can retain as much of that as possible when it does happen here, that's a vast majority benefit to the groundwater subbasin. Percolates down, recharges our own subbasin prior to going down there.
So how many wells would have to go dry before it created an unreasonable emission?
Yeah, I think
That's what people really are.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what we've been dealing with as a city.
For sure. And I think ultimately the goal is to have none. But we do understand there are wells drilled at so many different depths, in so many different types of strata throughout this area, that's probably unrealistic that we would ever get there. So we need to set markers for when you have, immediate action, right? We have these sort of two parameters. One is, hey, looks like we're getting low, let's start doing something about this. Or, hey, we've met a minimum threshold, we need to do something and we miss, right? The goal is to never be here. And so we say, if we start seeing any specific area have, let's call it, I think we have an 85th percentile is currently what's in our data. So that's sort of our cutoff date that says, hey, if we start to see in any given area 15% of wells going dry, there is an issue in this portion of the or this portion of the subbasin that we need to look at now. Some of what's happening currently with a lot of the issues with wells going dry is the short-term effect of drought, right? So we have to be careful about long-term planning versus short-term effect of drought. We understand that during drought years, it's going to happen that some older, less conditioned, shallower wells may go dry. What part of the GSP is to manage new wells that go in place, help set regulations for how deep they need to be in order to make sure that we have a sustainable well, and then when we have these periods of low and high, we don't just continuously cycle through dry well, wet well, dry well, wet well. It is obvious that throughout the future, as we move ahead, groundwater use is going to be imperative, and that these lower levels than historic are probably likely to continue. And so we need to have a sustainable setup for that, correct?
If this is finished and adopted, will it be an official document that can be used by county and city government to determine development? You know, let's say somebody wants to develop somewhere, can this document be used to say, sorry, that's not a good place for development, or?
You know, that's an interesting question. The GSP will be giving data to be used by, say, for example, city government. That data will allow you to say, hey, look, you're in an area where if you want to drill a well, for example, and have a small community water service for a small subdivision, right? That well will have to be a minimum of this deep. Or, hey, our recharge rate within this basin isn't high enough. We probably shouldn't drill a 16-inch well that takes out 5,000 gallons a day in this particular area. And those decisions can be made. But localized permitting is localized permitting. The city of Corning, if there were wells within the city of Corning, controls that permitting process. The county of Tehama controls their permitting processes. Land use in our city is their own. And so what our goal is to work with you when we talk about development. Our goal is to work with the localized agencies to be on the right track, if that makes sense. So this isn't like, this document isn't a force majeure, it's not a law, right? This document is a plan.
So I need to comment on the plan, for the most part, based on making sure that it's clear that we're not creating any binding effect on the city to fund these future priority projects. In the event that the projects benefit the subbasin as a whole, it shouldn't be the responsibility of our residents to fund that cost. And then the second major comment was really, priority projects that wasn't developed.
Not even at all.
And I felt like it was thrown in at the end, and should be considered as an alternative project because it's not developed in the way to do it.
None of the projects, all of the projects are a result of requests for information from, the major stakeholders. Full disclosure, this is day 2 of my second week with the county, and so things that happened in the past would be difficult for me to totally comment on. However, it's my understanding that requests for different types of input from different types of stakeholders through different types of meetings led to what these projects could possibly need. And so maybe at some point somebody commented, hey, there's a lot of stormwater backup within the city of Corning. Would it be a good idea if we used it as recharge? Those sorts, something as simple as that may have led to this type of discussion for what these plans are. This was put together through paid consultation and the management within the GSAs, and so it's difficult for me to say why that came about at this point. However, as previously stated, these are plans, and these are things that we would be working with the city of Corning to help make happen if it was the best benefit to all. And so when it says at the end of it that this is in pre-planning stage, that's the reality of it, is that this is something that could be a good idea if it functions for everybody, and we all get together and say that it does. So, and it's the GSA's responsibility to help facilitate programs like that with the stakeholders. So, and that is meant to assure you that there's nothing in this that is a binding contract that says that the city of Corning is going to have to build some sort of groundwater recharge from stormwater. That's not the point. The point is to use potential actions to talk about long-term plans and sustainability.
And I only have one more comment.
Okay.
So my only other comment would be is, I I'm on the Taney County Groundwater Commission. Interestingly, that commission reviews 4 other sub-basins, but only receives informational updates on the Corning sub-basin. And the Corning Sub-Basin Advisory Board meets separately and reviews everything in much more detail separately. It has been very difficult to keep up with 5 sub-basin plans.
I can imagine.
And that I would appreciate in the future better communication for what's happening in Corning based on that decision that was made previously. Because I've been responsible for looking at 5 different plans.
And the 4,000 pages piece.
Yes,
Yes.
and it's hard to,
And one thing I will say about this in general is, although I was not here for the vast majority of the manufacturing of these plans, I have in my week and 2 days had to try and catch up and read them all. And they are extensive, and I can most definitely see how that would be a problem, right? Sharing that much data with anybody is a very difficult thing to do. Of course, there's been this attempt to have these public outreach, to have, review of these things, but every time you do is incredibly simplified because you can't share 4,000 pages worth of data with anyone effectively. And so, that's why I'm here to answer questions. That's why, as you go through this, you have my email on here. Send it to me. I will look at it. We can talk about it. That stuff's all good. That's the overall goal of this as a general rule, is to move forward and interact with our stakeholders and come up with stuff that works for everybody. So, and as we move forward with this stuff, I'm sure we'll be sharing more data with you. Groundwater will be a great place to do so. I like to interact with others, and there'll be more of that as we move on.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you very much for the presentation and your time this evening.
And truly, if you guys have any more questions, my email's in there. Feel free to shoot me an email.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Public comments and business from the floor. Somebody would like to comment on something that is not on the agenda, now is your time to do so. Step to the podium, keep it to a minimum of 3 minutes, please. Clock starts now. Yes, you're welcome.
Easier to share my lips. Absolutely.
How rude.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, my name is Diana Ramirez, I'm with Waste Management. I'm actually here on 2 different occasions with 2 separate public comments. I'll try to squeeze them all into 3 minutes.
You're not getting me 3 minutes.
Yeah. And I'm also here with the Corning Chamber of Commerce as well. So this evening I wanted to give a quick tip on, it's fall now, so I wanted to give a quick tip on green waste and green waste disposal, specifically residential. So that container, that larger container for green waste at home, we can accept items like grass, leaves, hedge trimming, small branches, but please, we ask no big stumps or bulky wood items go into that container. And we also ask, please do not bag the green waste material, just stick it right in the container. That's what I do, stick it straight in. And if that's just not enough space, you can bring it to us on that second Friday of the month. So the next one's going to be November 12th, so just a couple weeks away. If you're out there over these next couple of days and it's dried up a little bit, gathering up the leaves, go ahead and bring any extras over. We also ask, please do not contaminate or put materials that do not belong, so don't put overflow trash into the green waste bin. Also, it's hunting season started about a month and a half ago, so please no dead animals in the containers as well. And then if you do need an extra cart can be made available. It's only $5.71 a month to get a whole extra container out. So that won't be a problem. So, and again, the address to be able to do additional drop-off is 3281 Highway 99 West. And now, for number 2, for the Corning Chamber of Commerce, I wanted to bring to everyone's awareness as well as encourage participation in a new Shop Local campaign. The Corning Chamber has been participating in like a North State regional type of collaboration amongst multiple chambers throughout the North State. And one of the things that we have identified that we'd like to bring to communities and other chambers is a Shop Local campaign. So a free campaign has been developed that multiple chambers will be participating in the North State. And it's not just for chambers of commerce. It's also available for the business owners to be able to utilize, community officials, and community members. It is a social media base. It's free, it's easy to use, and it's customizable for anyone. And our next, or I should say the workshop to be able to know how to use it is going to be Wednesday, November 3rd at 11 a.m. So please save the date, and the Zoom link is coming soon. So we're really happy and proud to be able to bring that to the community and encourage folks to shop local this holiday season.
What was the time for the workshop?
The workshop's at 11 a.m. on Wednesday the 3rd.
It's a good day. Thank you.
Did I make it, Dave?
Nope, there, 10 seconds over.
I'll be back next time, Dave.
Is there no more public comments or business from the floor? We're going to move on to the consent agenda. At the same time this evening, there are 4 items at the bottom of the consent agenda. If somebody hasn't read them, I'm not going to read them all unless somebody would like to have them discussed. Just paying some invoices on some grant-funded projects. So if nobody has anything they'd like to have pulled and discussed further, do I have a motion?
I move we accept consent agenda items 2 through 9.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So passed. Unanimous. Nothing removed. Public hearings and meetings are none. Regular agenda. Approve appropriation of $10,700 from general fund reserves and authorize emergency purchase and installation of a new transfer switch in the amount of $10,694.19 from Power Up Electric for the police department's emergency backup generator.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. It's been a while since I've seen you folks. I'm here to ask for a big chunk of change that's already been approved under emergency circumstances by our city manager, because we all know we lose power at the police department and we lose everything, including citizens and all that stuff. So this came about during a weekly test we've been doing on the generator for about a year now. And the reason why we do these tests are exactly for this. Unfortunately, I didn't think that it would cause an issue that would need us spending. Transfer switch in layman terms is a switch that will switch the generator when it's running the power on to and off from shore power, line power, however you want to call it. So on the 12th of this month, during our weekly test, it stayed off longer than usual. Like the dispatcher was going because our backup power goes for 10 minutes, so we're going off. Public Works was called out, PG&E was called out, another local company was called out. Through troubleshooting and a phone call to Power Up from the Public Works' mechanic, they were able to determine it was the transfer switch. Power Up graciously sent somebody down immediately and said it's the transfer switch. So in order to replace or repair this, I went with the replace, because we know repairs aren't reliable all the time. So that's where we're at. I'm here seeking your approval to spend some of this money to bring us up to speed in case we lose power.
All of the police departments are not as important as the fire department.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely.
I think it's very vital that you have backup power in times of need, and this, in my opinion, goes without question.
Yeah, that's, you can't operate and serve the city without it, so that's a no-brainer. Fire department, police department, hospitals, they all need their backup power to serve the community, so.
After roughly 30 minutes of no power, it was getting a little frustrating.
Yeah, that doesn't do anybody any good, so.
How old is your generator?
Generator's fairly new, I think Public Works keeps a good eye on that, but it's one of those things where when you start looking at some internal stuff, instead of it just firing up, when
Yeah.
you go down that
Yeah.
one.
And ours over there is getting a little old.
The crew or the generator?
The generator and the crew.
It should be on the CIP, it's not, I mean, it's top.
I see mine on there, I just don't remember how old it was.
That's buildings, that's Public Works. Well, if there's no more questions or comments for the chief, do I
I
have a
move,
motion?
Mayor and Council approve the appropriation of $10,700 from city general fund reserves to police capital replacement fund 2116.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So passed unanimous. And we thank you. I will say, I'm glad that you guys are keeping up with those monthly tests and caught that before you actually had an emergency and had no power, so.
Absolutely. I would be knocking on your guys' doors.
All right, item number J11, approve agreement with Chico State Enterprises for GIS-related work in an amount not to exceed $33,000 utilizing existing grant funding. And that would be Christine?
So the city received what's called LEAP planning grant funds from the state to do a myriad of items. One of those items is to update our GIS capabilities within the city, to create an interactive zoning map. We've been working through this process for a few years now, and the funds allocated or proposed to be allocated to California State University Chico's Geographical Information Center would much expand this to also include addresses, parcels, land use, zoning, use permits, easements, encroachment permits, flood zone, road surfacing, areas of stormwater ponding, all parks, large family daycare areas, existing bike facilities, schools, and infrastructure layers, amidst other types of work. This would make it very easy for proposed developers to look at what facilities are where and what infrastructure exists, would relieve the staff burden, because typically right now what occurs is a proposed developer calls and then contacts Chrissy, and Chrissy goes and looks up the information. It takes a considerable amount of time because it's on, 50 different maps, and then contacts the developer back and provides information. Some of the public works related information has to wait for Robin to arrive, so this would provide better services to the public and is all grant funded. So with that, I'm asking for council support for the agreement with the CSU Chico GIS in the amount of $33,000 to fund this work.
Well, in my opinion, if it lessens the workload on our city staff, which is overworked as it is, and understaffed, and in the long run, it might make our city look more desirable to contractors, builders that, thinking we're trying to keep up with the times. I think it's advantageous for us to do this.
Yeah, I like the fact that, as if a contractor wants to come in or a developer, somebody, they have this information available to them. That's gonna save them a lot of time trying to get into contact with somebody at City Hall during business hours, that ain't on their lunch, ain't on vacation, ain't out sick. This is stuff that they could do at home, in their living room, in the evening, making a decision on where they want to come here, so, I'm very much in favor of it.
I am totally.
Judy, any comment?
I agree with that too.
All right, if there's no more discussion, do I have a motion?
I make a motion that Mayor and Council approve the agreement between the City of Corning and Chico State Enterprises for the GIS related work as more clearly described in the scope of work, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So passed unanimous. All right, item number J12, authorization to suspend existing feral cat program and direct staff to explore future options.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council.
That's why I was looking at you.
So we instituted a feral cat program in 2017 and budgeted $3,000 each year to provide spay and neuter services to feral cats utilizing Mill Creek Veterinary Hospital as our contractor performing the service. The relationship worked out really well for the first few years. It was pretty seamless. Lisa did a fantastic job describing the program to anybody that came into City Hall and all the rules in order to comply. But unfortunately, most recently, Mill Creek Veterinary Hospital has experienced numerous situations where people are bringing in domestic cats and trying to get them spayed and neutered following the program, and it's resulted in arguments between the veterinary hospital staff and the customer, whereby the hospital now no longer wants to participate in the program. They want to charge us the full rate, and they also do not want to determine whether the cat's feral or not, that they would just accept every single cat that came in. My thought is that once the word got out that we are accepting for any cat, our budget would very quickly get fully absorbed. So we're asking tonight to unfortunately suspend the program, and staff will look at other options to see if there's any other vet offices that would be willing to work with us. To be quite clear, I don't have a lot of high hopes, because when we instituted this program in the beginning, Mill Creek Veterinary Hospital was the only veterinary office that was willing. So with that concludes my presentation, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. Lisa probably has more hands-on information than I do. She handles the phone call, but we're kind of in a bad situation.
Well, in my opinion, I know the vet's office doesn't want to have to determine what's feral and what's domestic, but is there any way we can put on the voucher that if it is deemed that your cat is not a feral cat, you will be held responsible for the cost?
It's on there, and Lisa, and Lisa verbally tells every single person that that's going to be the case, that if the vet determines the cat's not feral, that you're going to be responsible for the cost. It's just resulted in arguments where, the customer's saying it is a feral cat and the vet's saying it's not.
Yeah. It sounds like it's something that we're going to definitely have to have some more discussion on. It's not going to help us to deal with our cat problem by doing away with the program completely. I know plenty of neighborhood cats in my neighborhood that are, pets that have babies running wild all over the block, because most cat owners let their cats roam the neighborhood. So what's feral and what's not feral, we're probably going to have to spend more money if we want to continue to try to corral the problem. But it's definitely something that we need to have a discussion on and have some new direction moving forward.
So the veterinarians at Mill Creek, they felt really bad about bringing this up because they understand the problem. They want to help in controlling the problem, but unfortunately it has gotten to be a very heated situation that their staff is having to deal with when people are bringing in these cats that are not in any way, shape, or form feral, and they don't want the responsibility of
Shouldn't be
becoming
on
more.
there.
No, not at all. And a lot of your feral cats come from domesticated pets that get pregnant, have a litter of kittens, and then the owner just lets them go free, and now you've got a bunch of, so, we're gonna have to have some discussions and determine how much we're gonna spend and what rates we're gonna, this is gonna be just started over. But it's not something we can back away from completely either. We need to just decide which way we're gonna go forward with it.
They basically said they will not take any more at this time,
Yeah.
So would the council, just so I have good guidance, would the council be interested in exploring, like, free spay and neuter days for cats? Or a certain budget threshold for any cat, regardless of, whether it's feral or not? I just need to know a little bit more so I can...
Feral or domestic, they're multiplying, and the problem is that they're multiplying. It don't matter if they're feral or domestic. And
Crazy, there's so many cats.
drive at night and you will still see it. Like, it gets worse every year, and I think we need to find a solution where we can, have any cat fixed, being domestic or feral, but we do need to look into it and see what we can find.
Put a ceiling on the, like you said, the budget, that's it. Once we get there, we're done for the year.
Find out what costs are gonna be reassociated with who we use moving forward. And then we have to put a cap, this is what we can spend each year.
Well,
and just bylaunch it each of our rounds.
is there a way we could do it without advertising that we're gonna spay and neuter any cats? Just let them think it's still the same program, but then have the vet not ask any questions?
This is a very small town and the word gets out quickly.
Yeah.
You're all for
All I
it,
want to say is that
we even have people coming from outside the city.
Well,
That's how far the word has gotten out.
I agree with Chewy, and we need to put some kind of guidelines. We're not gonna spay and neuter people's cats from Red Bluff and Chico, so we're gonna have to set something up to where you have to be a resident of this community. But whether it's a feral cat, a pet, whatever, if it's your cat, we don't wanna have babies.
I know that, we have a church cat that is wild. And he was sick, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, and I trapped him. And I took him to Chico, and I got a voucher where I paid $25. This is a lot more than that to fix him. And, that was a big help, because he was sick also. I probably spent $400 on a stupid cat. Oh, shut up. Not talking to you, I'm talking to someone that's laughing behind you.
Which one?
But the $25, and then they give him all of his shots and everything.
the county already operates some low-cost spay and neuter clinics. I could provide a report back of when they are. I don't think that alone would even come close to dealing with the problem. But it is.
$2,000 that we've been spending on the feral cat and roll it over into a program with the county, say for Corning cat, and then, set a price for $5, $10, $20, I don't know. But then you could get like 2 cats spayed, or 3 or whatever in that program. You could offer, I don't know.
I say you look into it, Spark, come back with
Yep.
options.
Are there grants?
No.
We
There's no
looked at
grants
that
for
last time we
There's no
talked about
grants for
this.
things like that.
There's nothing for that. Yeah, Chewy, Karen, you guys all in agreement that Christina looks into it some more, and
Definitely.
that's the direction we go?
You guys need a motion.
Do we need a motion?
I'm gonna,
Okay.
And if we could get the people to quit feeding,
That's the problem.
Mhm.
I think that's part of it, is that they're, by feeding them, they're getting the cats used to coming up to humans, and so when the vet looks at it, the cat is friendly with
well, and
humans.
if they're getting enough nutrition, then they can have babies. I mean, I know that sounds horrible, but if they're not getting enough to eat, they won't be having babies. I know that sounds horrible, but it's true.
I move
motion?
Mayor, what's that?
That motion?
I move Mayor and City Council suspend the existing city feral cat program and direct staff to explore options for a revised program.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass unanimous. All right, no items placed on the agenda, communications, correspondence, and information?
Yes. Council received a card from former employee and city council member Darlene Dickerson, thanking the council and city staff for flowers sent following the recent death of their husband, Victor Dickerson. He was also a former employee.
That's it. All right, reports from mayor and council members. David?
I went to a TCPC meeting yesterday, and not much on the agenda, just asking for more money for projects they got coming up, Robinson, let you know what's going on, but, funny how things never cost what they're anticipated to cost.
Yeah.
But they're gonna be moving ahead with a couple of projects they've had in the works for quite some time.
Karen?
The Corning Senior Center and CCA and First Christian Church are, the official places for, leftover food or, edible food to be stored, to be distributed for, the city of Corning. We just signed a contract.
Could I add one more thing, remember? Well, it probably doesn't affect anybody in this room, but the fire hall now on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons is a place, the county was handing out cases of water to people with their wells being dry every 2 weeks, I think it was. Now water is available at the fire station on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoons. I think from 2 to 4:30 or 2 to 4, something like that.
Chewy?
Yeah, November 11th, I have Corning in the evening at Kairos Floral from 5:30 to 6:30. And then December 4th, we have our hometown Christmas parade at 6. And December 9th, we have our Christmas mixer at Mechanics Bank at 5:30. It'll be a mixer and toy drive. And then on January 29th, we have the installation dinner at 6, coming up again. It'll be the Roaring 20s theme, so get your flappers and mob suits ready. We're celebrating 100 years, I believe.
Another thing, the parade, the Veterans Day Parade is looking for entries. November 11th, the Veterans Day Parade.
And the other.
Entrance.
You'd probably be late anyway, it won't matter.
You good, Chewy?
Yeah, and I'll give more info on the Christmas parade once it gets closer. I don't want to overwhelm you guys with so much info.
I have nothing, so meeting adjourned.